neighbors, it's Brad here at Etrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the SumoSprings rear suspension enhancement on a 2022 Ford E-Series Cutaway. A jounce bumper replacement is one of the quickest and easiest ways to really get a better handling vehicle, especially when you're loaded down either pulling a trailer or having a heavy load. And the reason being is it closes up the gap where normally your factory jounce bumper would be and the axle. So normally for it to bottom out on the factory jounce means that it's going to have to squat quite a bit. And throughout that process, squat is going to translate to less steering feel, less braking, and overall just kind of feel like the vehicle is going to struggle to handle the load, where adding a jounce bumper replacement is going to fill that void and give you back the steering feel, the braking, and it's going to keep your suspension in the back from being overworked. And it's progressive, which is cool. So as it's making contact already with the axle, it's going to be a nice soft absorption of the bumps. But as you add more weight, it's going to progressively fight against that. So as you get a heavier load capacity, the more it's going to fight against that. Now this is rated at 2,800 pounds. It's not going to give you any added capacity, but it's meant to support that weight. It's also going to fight against sway, which is a huge thing when it comes to something down the road like this, where wind gusts are going to move it all around. With this closed up on that gap, it's not really going to allow that body to twist around as much, and it's going to bring down the body roll in general. You're going to get a little bit better steering feel out the gate, and it's going to give it a little bit sportier of handling in a good way. Originally, we're going to install airbags on this, but the bracket wasn't able to fit. So this was going to be my next option to recommend to the neighbor, because you get a lot of the same benefits of the airbag as far as that load capacity holding. But these are great because there's zero maintenance. There's no adjustability, but most of the time these are designed pretty well to where they're going to work extremely well with the chassis. You don't have to fill them up. You don't have to do anything. Once they're installed, which takes a total of maybe 15 minutes, they're going to work every single time. And I think overall you're going to be happy with the transformation that it does to your vehicle. Long term, these hold up to weather great, all kinds of temperatures, all kinds of road grime chemicals that you can throw at it. This will be able to handle that no problem. So once they're installed, you get peace of mind and a better experience every single time. So for those of you that are doing this installation at home or in your garage, this is a nice easy one, but I'm going to walk you through the steps to make sure you get it installed. Now before we begin the installation, let's take a look at the factory jounce bumpers. And this sits on our frame, and in order for these to bottom out, it takes quite a bit of space, and by that point your suspension is already sagging quite a bit, whereas our SumoSprings will fill that void, and that way there's engagement immediately with the axle, and that's just going to translate to a reduction in sway and just a smoother ride overall, and it's not going to allow our suspension to squat down. So we'll grab our SumoSpring as well as our bracket and hardware. We'll head underneath once we get it raised up, and we'll be ready to put it in. First thing we're going to get installed is our bracket, and our stud is going to go right where we had our jounce bumper, and you'll see this outside frame, that's going to go towards the outside, so it should sandwich in the frame just like that, and that holds it in place really well. And as far as getting hardware in place to hold it, we have a flat washer and then a nylon lock nut. And this is going to be a 9/16 ratcheting wrench. If you can get a socket in here, that might make it a little bit easier. But with our wire bundle here, a ratcheting wrench is going to do the job. So I'll get this started by hand, and we'll get this tightened down. As you're tightening down, just hold that plate up, and once you get it tightened down, it should hold it in place really well. If you haven't raised your vehicle up enough, you're going to want to make sure that you have a space for that SumoSpring to slide in. Now at this point, you want to decide if you want to use the spacer or not, and this is just going to fill that void up even more, so you'll get quicker engagement. On ours today, I really don't think we need it because the gap is pretty well set up for this to sit right in there. And based on if you're using that spacer or not depends on which serrated flange bolt you're going to be using. If you're not using the spacer, you can use the short one, and that's what we're going to be using. And we're just going to raise our Sumo in place. So if you haven't raised it up enough for this to slide in, go ahead and do that. And the rear hole towards the rear of the RV, we're going to be using that. So we'll take our serrated flange bolt, we'll feed it down through that hole. And then I'm going to get this started on the top of our Sumo where it's threaded. This is also going to be a 9/16 to snug this down, but there is a torque setting associated with this one. So once we get it snugged down, we'll come back with our torque wrench. Torque settings are going to be found in the instruction manual, and the reason I'm using a crow's foot attachment is to gain access to that. A socket is going to probably be too tight between this and the frame rail. The torque setting is relatively low, and even with my crow's foot attachment, I think I'm going to struggle to be able to get that in place. So what I would suggest in this part, I don't really have any tools to be able to get this torque down properly, but I'm going to just take my ratcheting wrench and give it a nice hand tight. You don't need to get crazy here because the torque setting is relatively low, but if I don't have a crow's foot attachment that's going to work, you may not at home as well. The main thing is we are getting it snug. So with that snug down, all that's left to do is repeat on the other side while you have the suspension raised up. Once you get that all tightened and torque in place, we can lower down our vehicle and then we can take it out for a ride and see how it does. And that was a look and installation of the SumoSprings rear suspension enhancement on a 2022 Ford E-Series Cutaway.